Most fathers are afraid of the day their kids stop calling. I used to be one of them. Then last June, on Father's Day, in the backyard I built for a family that used to fill it, I found out there's something a whole lot worse than a son who stops calling. There's a son who looks you dead in the eye, tells you he wishes you were never his father, and then picks up his phone and dials 911 with your name in his mouth. My name is Ray Whitaker. I'm 68 years old. For 35 years, I ran a little company called Whitaker Alarm and Security out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I put security systems in people's homes. Cameras, sensors, panic buttons, the works. I spent my whole working life teaching folks how to protect the people they love from the danger outside. The stranger at the window, the hand on the door in the dark. It took me 68 years and one Father's Day to learn the lesson I'd spent my whole career missing. The danger almost never comes through the door you're watching. By the time you see it, it's already inside. And more often than not, you're the one who handed it the key. Let me back up, because to understand how a good son ends up calling the police on his own father, you have to understand what somebody spent 3 years quietly doing to get him there. I have one child. His name is Kyle. He's 39. Kyle was the light of my life. I mean that plainly. Colleen and I tried for 11 years to have a child, and we near about given up when he came along, and so we raised him like the miracle we believed he was. Maybe we spoiled him a little. Maybe we made him a little too trusting, a little too eager to please the strongest voice in the room. A soft-hearted boy, but a good one. He'd help an old lady across a parking lot. He cried at his mother's funeral like his whole chest was caving in. Colleen was my wife of 41 years. She passed 2 summers ago. Ovarian cancer, the quiet kind that hides until it's too late. I nursed her at home for the last 5 months with a hospice nurse named Marisol who became like family, and I held Colleen's hand at the end, and she told me. I'll come back to what she told me, because it matters more than anything else in this story. For now, all you need to know is that when I buried Colleen, I had 2 things left in this world that I loved. My son, Kyle, and my grandson, Theo, who was 2 then and is 4 now, and who has my father's ears and his mother's laugh. I figured I'd spend my last years being the best grandpa a boy ever had. Somebody else had other plans. Before I tell you about her, do an old man one small kindness. If you've ever loved somebody who let another person turn them against you, tap that subscribe button. It's free, and it tells me you understand what this story is really about. Give it a like while you're there. And I'll ask you something at the very end that I've been turning over in my head for a year. So keep your answer ready for the comments. All right. Her name is Vanessa. Kyle married her about 3 years ago. I want to be fair to her, so I'll tell you she was charming. Beautiful, sharp, attentive. At the wedding she called me Dad and cried on my shoulder and told me she'd never had a father figure and how lucky she felt. I believed every word. I was so happy my boy had found somebody who seemed to adore him. Looking back now, with the clarity you only get after the house is already burned down, I can see it started about 2 weeks after the honeymoon. Small things. That's how it always starts. Small enough that calling them out makes you look paranoid. Kyle stopped answering the phone when I called. Vanessa would call back later and explain he was so busy, so stressed. Work's a nightmare. Sunday dinners got harder to schedule. Then they stopped. Little comments would find their way to me secondhand. That I'd said something at Thanksgiving that hurt Kyle deeply, something I had no memory of saying because I never said it. That I'd been weird with Theo. That Colleen, God rest her, had confided things to Vanessa before she died. Each thing on its own was nothing. A misunderstanding. A busy young family. I told myself the story every parent of a married child tells themselves. They've got their own life now. Don't be that clingy old man. Give them room. There were 100 little cuts, and I let every one of them heal over as nothing. The Christmas card I mailed came back marked return to sender, and when I asked, Vanessa said Kyle must have updated their address online and forgotten to tell me. So sorry. I wasn't invited to Theo's third birthday. I found out it had happened from a photo online, a bounce house and a dozen kids. And when I called, hurt, Vanessa gently explained that Kyle felt it was safer to keep things small. And did I really want to make his son's birthday about my feelings? Every time I pushed, I became the problem. Every time I pulled back, I disappeared a little more. She had built a machine with only 2 settings, go away and go away faster. I gave him room, and she used every inch of it. By the second year, I was seeing Theo maybe once every 2 months, always with Vanessa hovering, always cut short. Kyle looked at me differently by then. Careful, guarded, like a man watching someone he'd been warned about. I couldn't understand it. My warm, soft-hearted boy had grown a wall between us, and I couldn't see a single brick of it going up. I know now what was happening on the other side of that wall. She was talking. Every single day. Drip, drip, drip. Reframing 39 years of a father's love, one poisoned sentence at a time, into the story of a dangerous, controlling, unstable old man his wife was bravely protecting him from. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew, going into last Father's Day, was that I missed my son so bad it was a physical ache, and that when Kyle called and actually invited me to a cookout at their place, I cried in my kitchen out of pure gratitude. I should have known. A man who installed security systems for 35 years should have known that when the pattern suddenly breaks, when the door that's been locked against you swings open easy, that's not the danger passing. That's the danger inviting you in. Now I need you to sit with me through what happened in that backyard, because it's the hardest part, and I've never told it start to finish to anybody. I got there early, brought a gift for Kyle, a good watch, the kind his grandfather wore, brought a toy dump truck for Theo. Vanessa met me at the gate, warm as a summer morning. Dad, so glad you came. Kyle was at the grill, stiff, quiet. There were other people there, Vanessa's mother, a couple of their friends, an audience. I understand now that the audience was the whole point. When I went to hug my son, he stepped back like I was a stranger reaching for his wallet. Something in my chest folded up small and quiet, and I told myself it was nerves, that he'd loosen up, that the boy I raised was still in there under the wall. I spent an hour trying to reach him, asking about work, about Theo, getting one-word answers. And the whole time Vanessa orbited us, touching Kyle's arm, murmuring in his ear, watching me over the top of her wine glass with a look I mistook for warmth. Then I made the mistake that sprung the trap. I asked if I could take Theo to the park sometime, just the 2 of us, grandpa and grandson. And Kyle put down his spatula, and he turned around, and in front of every person in that yard, he said it. No, you're never going to be alone with my son. You don't get to do to him what you did. I said, Kyle, what I did? Son, what are you talking about? And that's when my boy, my soft, sweet boy who cried at his mother's grave, looked at me with a coldness I did not recognize and said the words I will hear on my deathbed. I wish you were never my dad. The whole yard went silent, the kind of silence that has weight to it. I stood there like a fool holding a toy dump truck with a bow on it, and I felt every set of eyes in that yard land on me, and I understood I was on a stage I hadn't known I'd walked onto. And before I could get a single word out, before I could even make my mouth work, Vanessa let out a little cry and grabbed her own arm and stumbled backward like I'd struck her. I was 15 feet away. I hadn't taken a step. I hadn't lifted a hand, and she screamed, loud enough for the neighbors, "Don't touch me. Kyle, he's doing it again." Again, as if there'd been a first time. There'd never been a first time, but the word did its work. It landed in that yard like it belonged there, like it confirmed a thing everyone had already been told to expect. And Kyle pulled out his phone, and he dialed 911, and he told the operator his elderly father had shown up uninvited, become aggressive, and assaulted his wife. I have been afraid a lot of times in my life. I have never felt anything like standing in my son's backyard on Father's Day, listening to him describe a crime I did not commit to a police dispatcher, while a woman I barely knew performed an injury I never caused. The police came. 2 officers, decent men, doing their job. They separated us. They took Vanessa's statement, and Kyle's, and her mother's, who backed the whole thing up, said she saw me grab Vanessa's arm. 3 witnesses, a crying, injured woman, and me, an old man with no witness but the truth, saying over and over, I never touched her. I never touched anyone. You know who they believe in that situation? It isn't the old man. They didn't arrest me that day, thank God, but they took a report. They gave Vanessa information about filing for a personal protection order. And one of the officers pulled me aside, not unkindly, and told me it'd be best if I went home and didn't contact the family until things cooled down. I drove home in the dark. 68 years old on Father's Day, having been reported to the police by my own son for a thing I didn't do. The toy dump truck was still on the passenger seat. I never did give it to Theo. That was the lowest night of my life. Lower than the funeral. Because at the funeral, at least, I still had my son. I sat at that kitchen table till the sky went gray, the way I'd sat there the night Colleen died, except this time there was no casserole in the fridge from a neighbor, no cards, no one who even knew. When a man loses his wife, the world shows up. When a man loses his son to a lie, he loses him in the dark, alone, and there's no one to tell, because how do you even say it? My boy called the police on me on Father's Day. People don't have a face for that. I didn't have a face for it. If you've made it this far with me, friend, and I know this one's heavy, do an old man the kindness of tapping subscribe before I tell you how I climbed back out of that hole. It's free, and it means an old man's story got heard. Now let me tell you about the moment the grief turned into something useful. But here's the thing that a lifetime in the security business does to a man. When the shock finally wore off, somewhere around 3 in the morning, sitting at my kitchen table in the dark, an old habit woke up in me. I stopped asking why my son would do this. I started asking a colder, better question. Who benefits? Because grief asks why, but an investigator asks who benefits. And the moment I asked the right question, the whole ugly shape of it started rising up out of the water in front of me. Let me tell you what I did next. And let me tell you it saved my life, or at least the last good part of it. The first thing I remembered, sitting there in the dark, was that I am a security man. And a security man does not have an unwatched home. I have cameras, inside and out, discreet ones. It's a habit of the trade. You wire your own house because you can't help it. And it hit me cold and clear. The confrontation had been in Kyle's backyard, not mine. My cameras hadn't seen it, but Vanessa didn't know that. And more importantly, my cameras had seen everything else. Every visit. Every one of the rare times Kyle or Vanessa had come to my house over 3 years. And I keep my footage. 90 days, backed up to the cloud, another habit of the trade. So I started watching. Night after night. Every clip of Vanessa I had going back years. And what I found in my own footage was the first thread. There was a clip from 8 months back. Vanessa had come by alone, said she wanted to clear the air, sat at my kitchen table sweet as pie for 20 minutes. I'd forgotten it entirely, but the camera hadn't. And when I watched it again, knowing what I know now, I watched her while I was in the kitchen making coffee, my back turned, get up, walk to the bookshelf where I keep Colleen's things and photograph pages of Colleen's old journal with her phone. Slow, careful, then sit back down and smile at me when I brought the coffee out. She was gathering material, Colleen's own handwriting, her private words, to use. I didn't know yet what for, but I knew, watching that clip at 4 in the morning, that I was not dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a plan, and a plan has an author, and an author has a motive, and both of those things can be found by a man patient enough to look. I called an old friend that week, Hollis, who put in 30 years with the Kent County Sheriff before he retired to a boat and a bad golf game. I told him the whole thing, start to finish. Hollis listened the way old cops listen, without one interruption, And when I finished, he was quiet a while, and then he said the thing that steadied me for the whole rest of it. "Ray," he said, "you're not a suspect. You keep acting like a man who has to prove he's innocent. Stop it. You're the investigator here. She left a trail. They always leave a trail, and you know better than almost anybody alive how to pull one. So pull it. Quiet. All the way to the end. Then you drop the whole thing on the table at once, and you don't give her room to breathe." That was the second time in a week a person I trusted told me the same thing, in almost the same words. Build it quiet. Drop it all at once. It's the only way that works against someone this good. The second thing I did was call the two people left who I knew loved Colleen as much as I did. Her sister, Bev, and Marisol, the hospice nurse who'd been in our home every day for 5 months at the end. I need to tell you about a phone call now, the one with Bev, because it cracked the case wide open and because it broke my heart in a brand new place. I told Bev the whole story, the backyard, the police, and there was a long silence, and then Bev said, "Ray, oh Ray, is that why Kyle called me?" Turns out 3 months back, Kyle called his Aunt Bev, out of the blue, in tears, asking her to confirm something Vanessa had told him, that his mother, my Colleen, had been afraid of me, that in her final months, Colleen had confided to Vanessa that she'd wanted to leave me for years, that I'd been controlling and cruel, that she'd only stayed out of fear, and that she'd made Vanessa promise to protect Kyle from me after she was gone. Every word of a lie, a grotesque, calculated lie, built on the photograph pages of a dead woman's journal, twisted into a weapon and aimed at the one thing that could turn my gentle son into a stranger who'd call the police on me. They made my son believe I killed his mother's spirit, that I was a monster she'd spent her life hiding from, and a boy who loved his mother the way Kyle loved Colleen. What won't he do to punish the man he thinks tormented her? What accusation won't he believe? What backyard won't he weaponize? I had to set the phone down and breathe when Bev told me that. Because for months I'd been asking myself what I could possibly have done to make my gentle son so cold, digging through 39 years of memories looking for the sin, and the answer was that I hadn't done anything at all. The sin was invented, manufactured whole cloth, and fed to him a spoonful at a time by a woman who'd studied exactly which lie would turn his love into a weapon. It wasn't me he was cold to. It was a man who never existed. Wearing my face. Bev told Kyle the truth on that call 3 months ago. Told him his mother had adored me, that the afraid story was insane, that whoever told him that was lying. And Kyle had gone quiet and thanked her and hung up. And Vanessa, I would later learn, had an explanation ready for that too. Poor Aunt Bev was old and in denial, and of course she'd defend her brother-in-law. And wasn't it sad how the whole family had covered for me for years? That's the thing about a good manipulator. Every piece of truth that comes at her, she's already built a story to swallow it. But she'd made one mistake. She'd built her whole lie on Colleen's final months. And there was one person alive who'd been in the room for those final months, every single day, taking clinical notes. Who was not family, not biased, not old, and in denial. A professional witness. Marisol. I sat down with Marisol that week, and I'll tell you what she gave me, plain and simple. She still had her hospice records. 5 months of daily notes. And in those notes, over and over, in a nurse's flat professional language, was the truth. Patient's husband present and attentive. Patient's mood elevated after husband's visits. Patient expressed to nurse her deep love and gratitude for her husband of 41 years. Patient's primary anxiety was concern for husband's well-being after her passing. And there was one more thing. Marisol had, at Colleen's request, in her final lucid week, recorded a short video. A message. Colleen had wanted to make one for Kyle and one for me, and hadn't had the strength to finish Kyle's, but she'd finished mine. And in it, my wife, thin and gray and 3 days from the end, looked into that camera and talked about 41 years with the love of her life. About me. About how the only thing that scared her about dying was leaving me alone. I had never seen it. Marisol had held on to it, waiting for a moment that felt right, and the moment had never come. And then the family fell apart. She gave it to me that afternoon. That night, I watched it alone in the dark, and I'm not ashamed to tell you I wept like I hadn't since the day she died. There was my Colleen, 41 years of my life, using some of the last strength she had on this earth to look into a little camera and talk about me. About the morning I proposed on the bad knee that never bent right after. About how I'd held her hand through every scan. About how the only thing that frightened her about dying was the picture of me eating supper alone at our table. Not one word of fear. Not one shadow of the monster they'd built out of her. Just a woman saying goodbye to the man she'd loved her whole grown life. And I understood, sitting there in the blue dark, that this was more than evidence. It was the last gift my wife ever gave me. And though she never lived to know it, it was the thing that would one day hand me back my son. I want you to understand, I now held in my hands the complete and total destruction of Vanessa's entire lie. The hospice records, the video, Bev's testimony, and my own security footage of Vanessa photographing the journal she'd later twist. Any other man might have driven straight to Kyle's house and blown the whole thing up right there. But I didn't spend 35 years in security to kick down a door. You don't stop a threat by shouting at it. You document it, you build the case airtight, and then you present it in a way it cannot wriggle out of. Cold, complete, undeniable. And I still didn't have the most important piece. I had the lie about Colleen, but I didn't yet have the why. What did Vanessa actually want? Because women don't spend 3 years running a psychological operation on a family for the fun of it. There's always a low spot the water's running to. So I did one more thing. I called my lawyer, a sharp young woman named Priya Anand, and I asked her to quietly look into 2 things. Whether any legal action had been filed involving me, and the state of my son's finances, to whatever extent she could learn it. What Priya found was the bottom of the whole thing. There was already in progress a petition being prepared, not just the personal protection order from the backyard. A petition for guardianship and conservatorship, a legal filing to have me declared mentally incompetent, unable to manage my own affairs, so that a guardian could be appointed to control my money, my property, and my medical decisions. And the proposed guardian, the person volunteering to selflessly take over the affairs of the poor, unstable old man, was Vanessa. Priya laid it out for me across her desk in the flat voice lawyers use when they don't want to scare you, but they need you to be scared. If that petition went through, if a judge looked at a police report, a frightened daughter-in-law, and an old man with no one in his corner and signed it, I would lose the legal right to my own life. My house, my accounts, my medical decisions, where I lived, whether I could even refuse to be put in a facility. All of it in the hands of the woman who'd spent 3 years engineering exactly this. And the hearing was set for August. I found this out in early July. I had, give or take, 6 weeks to prove I was sane and honest and dangerous to no one, before a courtroom that had already been handed a story that said otherwise. 6 weeks. I'd built a business on deadlines tighter than that, but never one where the thing on the line was the rest of my life. The backyard scene, the police report that he's doing it again, it wasn't rage. It was evidence. She was building a record, a documented history of an aggressive, erratic, dangerous old man, so that when the competency petition landed in front of a judge, there'd be a police report to waive. Father's Day wasn't a family blow-up. It was an exhibit, and the why underneath the why, Priya found it. Kyle and Vanessa were drowning. A second mortgage called didn't fully understand, credit lines maxed. a business of Vanessa's that had cratered. They were months from losing everything. And there sat Ray Whitaker, paid-off house, 35 years of business savings, and a dead wife's estate. One competency ruling away from being a bank account with a guardian signature on it. She didn't just want to turn my son against me. She wanted me declared insane so she could spend my money while I rotted in a facility with my own son believing I deserved it. And then she handed me the last piece herself. Because that's the thing about people who think they've already won. They get careless in front of the very cameras they never think to look for. 3 weeks after Father's Day, Vanessa came to my house. Uninvited, all concerned, just checking on you, Dad. We've all been so worried, keeping up the loving family portrait for the petition. I understand now. She didn't stay long, but while she was there, her phone rang, and she stepped out onto my front porch to take it private, thinking she was alone. She was standing 4 feet from my doorbell camera, the one with audio, the one I forgot I even had until I sat down that night, out of pure habit, and pulled the day's clips. I've listened to that recording more times than is healthy. It's my former daughter-in-law on my porch talking to her mother. And in 90 seconds, in her own voice, she says all of it. That the old man doesn't suspect a thing. That the guardianship hearing is set for August, and the judge is a rubber stamp. That, and I'm quoting my son's wife word for word. Kyle actually believes his dad a monster now, Mom. It's honestly too easy. I just have to cry and he'll sign anything. That once the conservatorship goes through, the house and the savings solve the whole mess. And this is the part that told me who she really was. Kyle doesn't even know about the second mortgage yet. And by the time he figures it out, it won't matter. She wasn't just betraying me. She was betraying him too, and laughing about how easy he was to steer on the front porch of the man she was framing 4 feet from a camera he'd installed with his own 2 hands 30 years into a career built on exactly this. Catching the thing that thinks no one is watching. I sat in the dark, and I listened to it 3 times. And on the 3rd time, that old cold clarity came down over me, complete and total, and I stopped being a heartbroken father. I became a security man with a closed case. Here's the part that I sat with the longest, friend. The part that decided everything about how I handled the ending. Kyle wasn't the villain. Kyle was a victim too. My soft-hearted boy had been fed poison every day for 3 years until he'd have believed anything about me. And he was being steered toward destroying his own father and never knowing he'd been the weapon, not the hand. If Vanessa's plan worked, Kyle would live the rest of his life believing he'd protected his family from a monster. He'd never know his mother loved me. He'd never know what he'd done. I could clear my name and cut them both loose. Let the law handle Vanessa, walk away from the son who'd called the cops on me, and protect what was left of my life. Or I could try to save him, knowing he might not want to be saved. I made my choice, and I did it the only way I know how. Quiet. Documented. Complete. I didn't call Kyle. I didn't call Vanessa. I called Priya, and I had her formally respond to the competency petition with the hospice records, Marisol's sworn statement, my medical records showing a perfectly sound mind, and a forensic note about the origin of the fear narrative. That killed the conservatorship where it stood. A judge doesn't declare a man incompetent when a hospice nurse's 5 months of records and his own clean bill of health say otherwise. Then I had Priya send the backyard the truth about the assault. Because it turned out one of Vanessa's own friends at that cookout, a decent person, it turns out, had been filming a video for social media when it happened, panning across the yard, and had caught the wide shot. Me 15 feet away, holding a toy truck, never moving, while Vanessa flinched at nothing. That friend, when she later heard a police report had been filed, was horrified and gave the clip to Priya. The assault case evaporated. You can't prosecute an assault the video proves never happened. And filing a false police report, it turns out, is its own crime. But I saved the real move for last. The one that wasn't about the law at all. I asked Kyle to come to my house. Alone. I told him I wasn't angry, that I only wanted to give him something from his mother, and then he'd never have to see me again if that's what he wanted. Curiosity, or maybe some buried thread of the boy he used to be, brought him. He stood in my living room like a stranger, arms crossed, wary, standing closer to the door than to me, ready to leave, maybe hoping to. And I didn't argue with him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say one word about Vanessa, or the police, or the petition, or any of it. I'd learned something over those weeks of watching footage in the dark. You do not win a person back from a lie by arguing with a lie. Arguing just proves you're the kind of man who argues. You don't tell them the truth. You show them, and you let it do its own quiet work. So I just turned on the television, and I played him his mother. I played my son the video of Colleen, 3 days from death, thin and gray and luminous, talking about how much she loved his father. I didn't watch the screen. I watched Kyle. I watched his crossed arms come undone. I watched his hand come up to his mouth. I watched 39 years of a real childhood rise up and go to war with 3 years of manufactured poison, right there on my boy's face. And I watched the real thing win, inch by inch, the way I'd once watched him learn to walk across this same floor. When it ended, the room was so quiet I could hear the old clock in the hall. And I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything at all. I just handed him a folder. The hospice records. Bev's statement. The clip from the backyard showing I stood 15 feet away and never moved. And last, the thing I'll go to my grave remembering the weight of handing my own child. The guardianship petition, with his wife's name typed on the line where the guardian's name goes, and a date in August when a judge was going to sign his father away. He read it standing up. His hands started to shake around page 2. And then my grown son sat down on my living room floor, right where he used to build blocks, and he cried the way he cried at his mother's funeral from somewhere down at the bottom of him. And he said the only word that mattered. Dad, I'd like to tell you it all healed clean. It didn't. Some things don't. Kyle and Vanessa are divorcing now. The false report charge and the exposed petition made sure the court sees her clearly in the custody fight. And Kyle is fighting like hell for Theo, and I am helping him pay for the lawyer, because that's what a father does. Kyle still can't fully forgive himself for that backyard, for the words, for the phone call. I've told him 100 times it wasn't his hand on the wheel. He's getting there, slowly, and I see Theo now, every week. He's got the dump truck. Took 2 years, but I finally gave it to him. Some nights, it still sits on my chest, my own son on Father's Day, telling me he wished I were never his dad, dialing the police with my name in his mouth. But then I remember that those weren't really his words. They were hers, coming out of a mouth she'd spent 3 years learning to operate. And I remember the sound he made on my living room floor when he got free of her. Dad, just that. I spent 35 years teaching people one truth about protecting the ones they love, and I'll leave you with it because I finally learned it myself the hard way. The lock on the front door only stops the stranger. The real danger is the one you've already welcomed in, the one you've handed a key, the one who smiles at your table and photographs your dead wife's journal while your back is turned to make the coffee. You can't keep that one out with an alarm. The only defense you've ever had against that one is the truth, kept, documented, and shown at the right moment to the person who needs to see it. She spent 3 years teaching my son to fear me. It only took me one video of his mother to give him back. Now here's my question, and I mean it because I still go back and forth. Would you have done what I did? Try to save the son who called the police on you? Or would you have cleared your name and walked away from him for good? There's no wrong answer. I just want to know how you see it. Tell me down in the comments. If this story meant something to you, do an old man that kindness, subscribe, hit like, and hold the people who love you a little closer this week. And check who you've handed your keys to. You'd be surprised who's already inside. I'll see you next time.